Open Market is sponsored by AdLib, the self-serve DSP solution making advertising easy. What do the world's largest demand-side platforms have in common? They're effective, but they require large annual contracts and spend minimums. With AdLib, growing agencies get a single platform that connects to every top global DSP with no contracts, no spend minimums, and G2's #1 ranked support. That means access to the entire universe of TV, digital out-of-home, audio, display, video, and native without a hassle and with no blind spots. It's incredibly easy to use, plus it can automate most of the work your team spends hours a day doing manually. Get the most powerful media buying technology without the barriers to entry. Check out AdLib at getadlib.com today. Welcome to Open Market, a podcast about building companies in the advertising industry. I'm Joe Zappa, and I'm joined by Eric Franchi and today's special guest, Chris Riedy, who is CRO at tvScientific. Chris, welcome.
Thanks, guys. Really excited to be here.
Hey, Joe. Haven't seen you in a while. Where you been?
Yeah, good to see you. I'm coming to you from the Hollywood Hills.
Very nice.
Glamorous. Yeah, I have a client, Oxford Road. They're the largest independent audio advertising agency, and they have a big event, and we're staying in Hollywood, so I get to hang out in LA this week.
Good for you.
Yeah, so Chris, what we wanted to talk about mainly today is your experience building sales orgs at media and ad tech companies. So you were previously at Twitter for 11 years, leading what I imagine was a very large team. Now you are Chief Revenue Officer of tvScientific, which is an ad tech startup. Why don't we start by having you tell us about some of the differences between building a sales org at a large media organization and what you're doing now at tvScientific.
That sounds great. And thanks again for having me. You know, if I may, actually, I think there's some similarities and definitely want to get into the differences. But from my perspective, building a team, in this instance, a sales team, really starts with great people. And I think that with great people, you can build great teams. Great teams can do things. But if you shortcut the great people side of things, it makes it pretty difficult. So for me, a great person is a creative problem solver, self-starter, motivated, and kind of this insatiable thirst to learn. Those things I think are critical. And I think it's universal, independent of big company, small company, or any stage. The other thing I would say just about building a team, at least as I found in this job and the job I had a couple jobs ago when I was running EMEA for Twitter, it's really important to go in and listen first to customers, to the existing team, before you start saying what you think should happen. Because I have found that building trust with great people ultimately leads to great teams. And I think the way to do that is to go in and listen. And so I share that simply because I think those transcend time frame. If you don't find great people, if you don't build trust, if you don't listen, it's going to be really hard to build a great team. Okay, so those are universals. Things that are different, I think the role side of things at an early stage, very much a build job, you really need to want to do all the jobs. You need to want to do the obvious ones, going in market, managing teams, working with marketing or actually being marketing. But you also need to be pretty comfortable being the HR team, writing job descriptions, building feedback templates, doing hiring huddles, all of that kind of stuff. You need to be really comfortable on the operations side. I think that setting up any team, you need goals, you need a plan to get there, and then you need a mechanism to measure said things. And at a startup or in a very early stage company, you're probably going to need to do that yourself. That is different. A bigger company, you're going to come into an existing framework. You'll definitely need to nurture a culture that is unique to your team, your sub-team within the larger ecosystem. But the frameworks will likely be there. The partners will likely be there. I think that's pretty different. I think another one is just on the hiring side. At an earlier stage or newer entity, I would look for more athlete hires. And what I mean by that is folks that have high aptitude, but maybe haven't done the job before. So high aptitude, good person, like we talked about, thirst of learning, and give them a shot, coach them. train them, go to market with them, and watch them develop. Whereas in a more mature organization, you're probably going to be hiring people that bring with them solutions, bring with them relationships. And I think that each works great, but you'll have access to different things depending on where you are. So the way I would summarize all of that is don't forget what is fundamental. You must find great people to build a great team. And to build a great team, you must build trust. That doesn't come just because you showed up and you worked at a cool company before. You really have to earn that. And that, for me, is paramount across any type of team building.
Was it a personal shock to the system, so to speak, going from, working at X, Twitter for a long time, when it was a much bigger organization, to going back to the startup days? Like, what's it like for somebody like you at your point in your career?
So I will answer that question in two ways. When I had an opportunity near the end of my time at Twitter to take over and lead the team in EMEA, which is Europe, Middle East, and Africa, I happened to start doing that during COVID from San Francisco, California, because I was not allowed to move to Ireland, where our European headquarters was, because of Ireland wasn't having anyone. That was a tremendous shock to the system, to start managing a business and a group of people that I knew, but hadn't worked with them before, at time zone that was 8 hours ahead. That was truly a shock to the system. Got to the point where my wife was like, this is not working. This 4 a.m. wake up and you tried to go start work. It's totally disrupting the house. That was a literal shock to the system. And then ultimately moving over to Europe and running that business gave me a good sense for how dynamic change can be and leaning into that. What we then had another thing happen at Twitter that brought about more change. And that was another shock to the system, if you will. So by the time I met Jason Fairchild, who's just an outstanding CEO at tvScientific, by the time I met him, I was kind of used to a lot of change. And this one is different, but it is more manageable in the sense that this company has needed a little bit more on the operation side. It's needed a little firmer plan with regards to how we go to market. Who are we trying to hire? Who are we calling into? And those things, to be fair, Eric, are just like, they're a little more straightforward. Like literally moving your family or trying to work in a different time zone 8 hours ahead, that was more difficult.
Obviously, hiring is critical to building these teams. You talked about finding people who are creative self-starters, and then in the startup environment, finding people who are willing to do a lot of different jobs. How do you screen for that? Like, do you have any hiring 101 practices for sales that you would share with the audience?
So the first practice I would share is to have a plan. I have seen a number of hiring instances where people just get on the phone with somebody and they talk to them and they say, I liked them or I didn't like them. I think it's really important to, out of the gates, say, okay, this is our interview panel. It's going to be the four of us, the three of us, whatever it may be. This is what I would like you to probe for. So help the folks in advance organize the questions they're going to ask and what the answers should look like or what you would like them to look like, such that when you get together in a hiring huddle after the fact to do a calibration, you can get specific feedback from somebody. You don't get caught in the soft, I liked them or I didn't like them or the energy wasn't there. You can say, I probed for new business skills and we got them. I probed for how do they deal with change and we got that. I probed for do they have potential to be a leader over time. So I think that is one thing that I think is of critical importance, such that you get the value of that 360 feedback. If you have three people asking random questions or worse, the same questions, it becomes personal perspective almost. And I think that can be really challenging, especially when you're trying to hire at volume. We just have gone through a phase at tvScientific where we've hired about 15 people on the commercial side in the last 10 weeks. And the team has done a tremendous job doing the interviews, putting forth the time, investing. And we're really fortunate to bring on a really good class of colleagues now. But that wouldn't have gone as well had we not set up a real plan. What are we looking for? What is the background? And then ultimately, when we interview, making sure that we're probing for specific areas. So we just make sure we don't have any missing bits as we say yes to people.
How important do you think industry expertise is? I imagine it might depend on the level. So you mentioned people earlier on, you're expecting you're going to have to train them, they're going to have to get up to speed, and later on, they need to have more industry experience. But it's like, as you're hiring those 15 people, how many of them have advertising media backgrounds, and how do you think about that?
I would always endeavor to get the best people you can get at any time. I don't think that's surprising at all. TV Scientific has had success, and we had success in early days of Twitter, also hiring folks without the background. So not hiring the perfect media salesperson. And that is that athlete hire, somebody that has aptitude, creative problem solver, and again, wants to learn. Because if you want to learn, I think you can make the transition from selling media to selling SaaS, or selling SaaS to selling media, or selling something very technical versus something that's maybe a little bit looser on the requirement side of things. And so if you can find those things, I think you can make it work. I would feel comfortable developing somebody. I think when you're at the more mature company, you are starting to look for somebody that has a more established point of view on the opportunity and how to win the business. And that may not be there with the early stage hires. And I think that person also is likely going to come with solutions to hit the ground running. And finally, at a more mature stage, I think you're going to find folks that do more than sell. So the client partners or the account executives that are working in more enterprise level companies, they're not just good salespeople. They have to be good business people, because they're going to spend their time with enterprise level CMOs and CEOs. And that's a slightly different conversation.
And a media oriented seller, can that person make a leap to a more SaaS focused sell? Maybe it's not pure SaaS or SaaS like, just give it ad tech. Have you seen people make that jump? Or do you think that, past a certain point, like you have to just be a specialist and you can't really transition without a lot of work?
Okay. So what I have seen as folks were making the decision to leave X over the last 18 months or so, I had a lot of colleagues who were quite capable media sellers that had interest in getting into SaaS. And they struggled to cross that chasm because they would end up showing that they were really good sellers and they were empathetic leaders and they had this desire to learn all the things we've talked about. But they'd run up against somebody who had that same thing and had been doing SaaS for 10 or 15 years. That's not a direct answer to the question. Your question is, can it happen? I can't say for sure because I've not run a SaaS organization. I have run different types of media organizations, some that are more technical, some that are not. I've run them in different parts of the world and seen different types of people be successful. And my ask of myself and my teams is that we are always open to unique backgrounds, because getting diversity of thought is critical to building a great team. And so I would hope that folks that are doing SaaS or vice versa that are doing media, if somebody's recommended to you by somebody that you trust and you meet them and they do, they impress you, they do a good job, I would lean into that and try. If you get it wrong, so be it. You make a change. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. But I think that if you stay too narrow, you will continue with this homogeneous population that probably will drive towards things that you already know. If you try something different, again, it may not work, but also on the flip side, maybe it works great. Maybe somebody that hasn't been so deeply involved in an industry is at liberty to ask different questions that fosters learning. So I can't say that it works, but I, as a hiring leader and as a business person, would like myself and my teams to be super open to the type of people that you onboard.
Let's think about the stages of building a sales org, or perhaps a better way to put it is, do you think about it in stages? So like, tell us about tvScientific. I think you joined about 8 months ago. Where were you guys at in terms of the size of the sales org, and then versus where the sales org was when you were at Twitter? I'm assuming there's a very big chasm there. And then how do you think about the evolution of a sales org from that early stage to a very mature one?
Sure. So I'll start backwards. My first job at Twitter 2012, I think I was managing a team of 10 or 11 people. And, I mentioned that the EMEA job that I had at Twitter when I took that, I think it was probably 300 or 400 people across 6 countries, plus sales partners that were working in kind of some of the smaller markets. So much more dynamic, if you will. And then finally, the end of Twitter is, north of 1,000 people and ultimately scaled down. I think what's really critical there in any of those things is to establish, again, what are we trying to accomplish? What are the goals that we are trying to accomplish? What's our plan to solve for those? And ultimately, how are we going to measure them? And stages, as you move through stages, I think you have to see success, preferably quantifiable success, that tells you that when you go to the CEO or the CFO or the board and say, hey, I'd like to grow this business, you can point back to data-driven reasons why. It may not work. You may find success in a small area and say, I think we could double the size of the team based on these inputs that are data-driven. It may not work. But at least that way, your CFO, your CEO, your board is going to have confidence that you are rigorous with regards to growth and you're not just being the opposite, which is a bit frivolous. So that's one thing I would say happens at every stage. When you're at 3 people, make sure you have a strong point of view on what success looks like before you go to 6 people. That could be as simple as like meetings that we're able to gather in a given quarter. You could go further and it could be bookings. So how many deals are we booking or how much gross revenue are we booking? It could get more mature towards, you could be looking at revenue per head. I think if we're delivering X dollars per head, once we get to that level, then we start to hire more people. And you get super mature and you get into kind of cost per revenue dollar, maybe more of a margin driven equation. And, working with strong finance partners will be critical there to help you. And I've been fortunate at tvSci and Twitter to have excellent partners that were just great thought partners. So I think that's one really important thing. What are you trying to accomplish? What are the goals? What's your plan? How are you measuring that? Gather the data and put together a data-driven argument. A couple other just build things. When I got to tvScientific, you had this like super hungry sales team. You've got a CEO and Jason, who is himself an incredible salesperson, and does a great job telling the story and advocating for the value proposition of the company. And the things that we've evolved, if you will, and it's really just turning, something that was good into something that's a little bit better. We have maybe tightened up around what people are doing. So started to focus individuals on particular industries rather than having them call across anything and everything. We have built a couple different channels within the sales team. So now we have an enterprise or managed accounts, and then we have an inside sales team such that we can maintain high velocity on one level. And on the other level, we can set the teams up to spend more time to win business, because with a more complex customer, it may take 3, 6, 9 months to win. And if you're just focused on the next dollar, you may leave that. You may find a customer that could be big in a year, but you leave it behind because it's too challenging right now. So those are the things that we're going through at tvScientific from an evolution stage. And I think that's very stage appropriate. As you start, go as fast as you can to find revenue, and then to find learnings that show product market fit. As you get there, start to ask yourself, how can I put these sellers and my sales team in a better position to be successful? And that might be by providing some specialization, inside sales versus outside sales, industry focus, et cetera, channel partnerships. So I think that's really critical, kind of scientific method, if you will, test and learn, and you find out something's not working, don't do it again. And when it is working, double down a little bit.
So going from that initial, finding product market fit stage to, scaling to the next level, what does your ideal sales team look like? And then when do you expand into supporting them, with CSMs? How do you sort of think about sales team and sales operations org design at various stages?
My ideal team looks like a bunch of really good people that are awesome problem solvers, independent if that team is 2 people or 2,000 people. So I don't mean to kind of over make that point, but I really think it's critical. With regard to do you start with a couple of SDRs, or do you start with, the most tenured seller or seasoned seller in a given segment? I think there's a lot of paths to doing this. What I would say is, let's just say I'm starting from scratch, zero. I would think about that athlete type hire. So hopefully somebody that I've been introduced to through a network, that somebody says this is a really good person. I would meet that person. And from there, I would really want to work hand in hand with them. And I would recommend this to any CRO or CEO, to make sure that you realize that you have to be out there with your team. You can't just hire a team and say, okay, now go figure it out and come back and tell me when you're done. I don't think it works like that, because a lot of sales is learning, and a lot of it is learning what's not working. So winning business is the best thing in the world, but getting great feedback about what maybe is precluding a customer from working with you, that's incredibly actionable. So you may lose one deal that may enable 10 deals in the future. And I just think it's critical for CEOs, CROs, leaders in general to want to lean into that. So that's the first thing I would say, whether they're an SDR role or a AE role, everybody's in the beginning got to do everything anyways. So hire the best people you can. Then I would say you really need some consistent and predictable scale before you start building in those ancillary teams. So going back to that early stage, you do need to want to do all the jobs. You do need salespeople that are great storytellers and don't need somebody to hand them a perfect deck to be able to win business. You do need leaders that are willing to lean into the data and find success. Like, what is working on behalf of this advertiser, such that you can get them to renew and hopefully upsell them into larger share of wallet. When I joined tvScientific, they had done a great job of going from, I don't know if you'd say 0 to 1 or 0 to 0.5, but they definitely were not at 0. Full stop. They had made a lot of progress. And so when I joined, the first month that I was there, I spent a lot of time in just conversations with everybody. It was very obvious that we brought in a sales strategy and ops partner, a leader who's done a great job for us. And that person, you got to bring them in at the right time, because too soon and it'll be a wild goose chase, and too late, you will have missed the opportunity to kind of find those signals of success that you then can lean into, and they will ultimately help you kind of pull through that data that allows you to build in a really data-driven way, quantitative way that drives the business. I don't know if that totally answered your question, but I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
I take your point about the need for salespeople, especially in the beginning, who can tell a story and, don't need a great deck handed to them, because I'm a marketer, and what I often see with early stage startups is sales isn't working. Like, the company isn't getting off the ground, right? This might be a situation in which it's very early and I'm talking directly to the CEO founder, and they're like, well, how can marketing help? Right. And that's a situation in which, you don't have product market fit yet. You're struggling to find customers, and it's kind of a tough message to hear, but the CEO kind of just needs to like hustle and do sales. And it's only at the point when they have enough customers that they can understand, like, whom are we going after and what do these customers like about us, that they can invest seriously in marketing. Because the first thing marketing's going to do is talk to those customers and understand like what the customers love about the company, and then just propel it back to the market to build the organization's reputation and relationships to further facilitate sales. But so it sort of starts with sales, and then you have marketing, and then marketing like further facilitates sales. That's how I look at it. But I'm curious how you, as a salesperson and a CRO, think about the connection between marketing and sales.
First of all, everything you just said, I absolutely agree with. And I think about marketing and sales as this like a 1 + 1 = 3 thing, where they are so reinforcing that without the cooperation and the alignment, you will miss out. And if you think about those two entities as siloed things, and worse, if it's like, well, marketing isn't doing their thing or sales isn't doing their thing, we brought in the leads and they didn't convert them, or those leads, like that story, something's broken there. And as a CEO or leader, you have to make sure that's not happening. I've seen that siloed teams that don't reinforce, they don't build on one another. And so the first thing that's critical for me is cooperation. Having a partner, I don't mind if it lives in a different part of the organization, if it's in the same org. At tvScientific, marketing is in the commercial org that I look after. But it's a partnership. It's not about telling somebody what to do. It's about saying, here's our challenge. How do we solve this? Gosh, when you do that well, it does just make the sales job so much easier. And for the marketer, if you're a marketer listening to this, sales should be your best friend because they are on the phone every single day with customers and prospective customers or in person with them, asking questions. And so you can sit in on those calls or watch those calls after the fact and get great insight into, okay, now I understand how to take this value proposition that we have and position it in a way such that it rings true. So I think that the cooperation is absolutely critical there. And again, feel super fortunate with the partnership I have had in my past and that I have at tvScientific.
Yeah, I think part of it is you ideally need a strategic marketing voice who isn't just going to be an order taker who's looking to sales to say, I need this, and then they're creating the collateral. I mean, that's part of it, right? That's part of the relationship. But ideally, that person is thinking alongside the CEO and the sales leader about, like, where is this company? Where do we want to go? Like, what are our biggest business problems? And then they can figure out a story that's going to enable the salespeople to go out there and sell more effectively because they've repositioned the company in such a way that it's going to be more attractive to its prospects. And in that case, marketing is doing, strategic work and helping drive outcomes. They're not just creating, tactical collateral that's going to move along conversations.
Completely. And tactical collateral is like really important. Giving a seller another reason to be in touch with a prospect is critical. You can't just say to a seller, okay, go figure it out. And it's like, you have to continue to arm them with insights, data, different value prospects, just to be able to say, hey, listen, I know that we haven't been in touch in the last month. I just want to make sure you have this, because that drip of a salesperson reaching out, it'll build trust over time with the customer. It's not about buy this, buy this, buy this. It's, hey, this is new and I want to make sure you're aware of it. And if as a marketing team and a sales leadership team, we don't do a good job of arming the sellers, well then, I mean, the sellers are your best marketing channel, or they are a very good one. So I agree that the tactical stuff is important, but I will say, Joe, like I listened to your, was it 2 times ago podcast and your framework of the 4 differentiated story, data and insights, thought leadership, and then, storytelling, being present, personable. I thought that was great. And a lot of it tracks with what I think is important for a marketing team.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, I also think sometimes marketers can actually be the salesperson's best friend because the CEO often is looking from a very high level at the market and they're thinking, what market should we be in and whom should we be going after to sort of unlock opportunities, right? So then sometimes the CEO can also be a bit divorced from the customer. And sometimes it's the marketer who can come in and be like, well, I'm talking to these customers and, our salespeople are out there trying to sell something that, the customer doesn't want, or the way we're positioning it, they don't want it. So the marketer, as the voice of the customer, as they're sometimes called, can also be a huge asset to sales, I think, in saying like, look, we just don't have a story we're arming these people with that works. And so we can send them to as many events as we want and they can pound the pavement as hard as possible, but they aren't going to be successful until we rethink the story we're telling in such a way that it will actually appeal to our customers.
I think about this, pictures worth 1,000 words, and 1,000 words that's a long statement. If you can get it and a marketing partner can help you crystallize this thing, y'all talked about what is the one thing that differentiates you. I think that is, if you can boil that down, it really will help your sales team. And I think for us, where tvScientific is right now, we're in this medium that everybody feels pretty familiar with, connected television. Many people are using it from a consumer standpoint. Marketers are, okay, my upfront schedule or my GRPs are shrinking, so we've got to extend into this new medium. We're in this space, but we're actually coming at it from a very different angle. We are trying to be outcomes inside of connected television. We are not a reach and frequency entity. We are really trying to show the search and social marketer that television can deliver outcomes, ROAS, cost per install, cost per purchase, foot traffic, signups, et cetera, et cetera. And I think in that world, we have concluded that, we're trying to establish a market, and that requires even more tight crystallization around the story. And it requires not collateral building, but almost like we talk about, we'll go to any panel and talk anytime, Jason or I, and we want to be in any story we can be, because this is a new medium and our sellers are out there and they get on the phone and they say, yeah, connected TV. And somebody says, oh, yeah, we do connected TV. I'm familiar with that. And then we have to articulate it's actually coming at it from a different perspective. It'll be like search and social, ROAS driven, machine learning optimization, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think without just good thought partnership, leadership inside the company, title agnostic, sales team inside the company, marketing, coming together to say, how are we going to break through? If you don't do that, you're likely not arming your sellers with ultimately what could make them most successful. And I think about that, the air cover of PR or attending conferences, et cetera, et cetera. It really makes a difference.
Does your sales approach differ when you're looking to, to your point, like establish a market, be more educational, be more consultative than where previously you just, you had media to sell, right?
Yeah.
Or X. We should figure out if it's X or Twitter.
It's Twitter, right? It's
okay.
Twitter.
It's Twitter. Yeah.
Twitter.
How does your approach, how does your sell change when you're in this moment?
Just if you're coming from an incumbent enterprise, big company, and you've only done that, be aware that all those people that you called on, when you go somewhere else to a much smaller company without maybe the same name recognition, you're likely not to get the same velocity of call return that you did in the past. That is just reality. And I will tell you one thing that we've had to do a little bit differently than we thought at the beginning of the year, tvScientific, is because we are trying to establish a market, because we can often get just lumped in, oh, CTV, I already do CTV. The outreach that would have worked at Twitter, i.e., hey, I am this person, I work at Twitter, we think there's a big opportunity for you in this way. So we would always think about, here's who I am, what's the opportunity we see, and can we just spend 10 minutes talking about it? And that works pretty well. You'd get a conversation out of that. We found here that it's hard to break through because, as we were just talking about, trying to nail that, hey, we're connected TV, but we're outcomes inside of connected TV, and it's a little bit different, et cetera, et cetera. It's hard in email. So what we have made a pretty dramatic pivot away from kind of leveraging email for, not that we don't leverage it, but relying on email from an outbound marketing standpoint, relying on kind of the lead generation in search or social, if you will. And what we're doing is we're trying to go purpose built into conferences. So going into Shop Talk, going into e-tail, going into Sub Summit, all these conferences that are built for the D2C retail and e-com is something that we're investing in right now. And rather than getting the right list and doing straight outreach, we're just showing to the conference. And if the conference will facilitate, which many are right now, these, kind of double opt-in face-to-face meetings, I'll be very honest with you, Eric. Beginning of this year, I said, those meetings, they can't be high quality. There's just no way they're high quality. Then I went to Shop Talk, sat down with our team, and I was really impressed with the curation that those groups are doing, setting up these meetings. Then you get the value of, okay, you did that, do the 15 meetings, the 20 meetings, whatever it may be. Then there's a happy hour that evening. You run into that person, they introduce you to somebody else. So that is a big change for us, because once you tell this story to a marketer, hey, we can use the big screen on the wall. We can target an ad effectively. From there, we can see what's happening. If it's something on the mobile phone or if it's on the website, we can track down log level data to show you conversion and we'll optimize against it. That story really, really works. But the story goes nowhere if you send an email and no one ends up getting on the phone with you. And so that is something that we have changed, we have leaned into, and it's driving value for us. And we did not do it. Not that we didn't do it at Twitter, but we just didn't spend as much time prospecting at a place like ShopTalk. Whereas now ShopTalk and eTail and SubSummit and others are proving to be just great opportunities for us.
Yeah, I think this idea of reinvesting into real world IRL stuff is definitely a trend.
So your title at tvScientific is CRO. This is a much discussed topic in B2B software. I mean, I think the idea of CRO as opposed to like a VP of sales is you're across, all the revenue affecting organizations. So customer success, marketing, sales, as opposed to just sales. But how do you think about that title?
It's a really good question, Joe. And I'm going to share just my personal perspective here. I appreciate the importance of titles. It is frustrating, but you do know that sometimes the higher title that does some outreach is more likely to get some response. And I think probably all of us are a little frustrated by that, but it does happen. And so we all should be aware of what our titles are. That being said, I don't put a ton of value into getting caught up in a title. There could be an incredible job that is a VP of sales job that's actually doing CRO-like work. But for whatever reason, that company is not at the place where they want C-levels, or I'm not sure. There could be a reason for it. And vice versa, you could have a CRO job that is actually much more narrowly scoped. And I've actually seen some of this lately where I've seen some traditional media companies taking what look to me like strong sales leadership jobs, but calling CRO of X, CRO of Y, and CRO of Z. So that's just an opening. Try not to get too, as somebody who's out there, if you're looking for a job, don't just the whole judge a book by its cover. The title, it's informative, but it may not be the reality. I tend to look for things like, where can I have a big impact inside of an organization? You can learn that by talking to the CEO or whomever's hiring for this job. Do they need me to help grow? Do they need thought leadership, or do they just need somebody to execute this thing? And then I'm looking for a category that is growing and has a need for more than just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And in this instance, I happen to be the chief revenue officer at tvScientific, and my world has traditional sales. It's got marketing. It's got business development. It's got the supply relationships that we lean into. And all of those things do work together. We talked about the marketing bit earlier. But interestingly enough, my last job at Twitter was I was VP of sales and marketing. I worked for the guy who owned the company, and I had all that same stuff. Titles were not something that you really leaned into heavily at the end of my time over there at Twitter. So I think that for me, it's really about what is the opportunity from a work standpoint and from a culture standpoint. Just make sure it maps. If you have C-levels and you're bringing in a sales leader, I would try to just on balance get those things right. And it's also okay if you don't. That's how I think about it. I want to be a part of a team where I can make an impact in an industry that's growing that needs more than rinse and repeat.
If there's one piece of advice for people that are in sales, aspire to be in a role like yours one day, what would you tell them?
The first thing is that desire to learn, I think, is incredibly important. This job that I have now, or the last one I had, they were in a sales organization, but they were so much more than that. You have to be a good partner inside of companies, to the product team, to the engineering team, to the finance team, to the HR team, obviously to the marketing team. And you may not have grown up in those organizations, like you may not have grown up in product, but you can learn that. You can ask questions. You can sit down with folks in your company and say, hey, I've never been a product manager. What's it like to do that? What's the work that you do? How could I be helpful to you? So that desire to learn and to build what I would consider to be more of a 360-degree perspective on how to run a business, I think is really, really important. It doesn't mean that you can't matriculate into a CRO job starting out in sales when you get out of school and then you just do awesome. But I think where where we are today, leaders at companies that are these big established enterprise, and then companies like the one that I happen to be in now, that's this fast growing, really exciting space. It's more than just being a salesperson. So that's the first thing I would say. And it's a great differentiator. The second thing I would say is be open to feedback. It is hard to open yourself up to the place where you say, hey, how am I doing? And what could I be doing better? But if you're not open to feedback, you will not get the opportunity to be the best version of yourself, because people will sense that. They will sense, I don't really want to give him feedback because he might get frustrated. And, I got to get home to the kids, and I'm not going to worry about that. And I have to give credit to a team I had a while ago at Twitter. They really gave me feedback that changed me. It helped me limit my ego and open up myself to the fact that I thought I was doing the things that were great for them, but it actually wasn't working out that way. And I can't tell you how to put yourself in a position to do that because it happened, but be open to that. Be open to feedback. Be willing to hear that you may not be doing well and that you could be doing better. Because when you're working with that team we've talked about, that is a team of great human beings that have a desire to learn, that are creative problem solvers, all that stuff, and you are able to check your egos and it's about the team, that's the nirvana state, because everybody's going after the same thing. And that's where I've seen myself grow the most. So want to learn, want feedback to get better, really try to limit your ego. And then, gosh, the last thing I'll say is find people like y'all. Be open to meeting new people and doing new things. And, Eric, you and I have had a chance to meet a couple times over the last year. Joe, we're just meeting today. And this is really important because no one is ever going to have all the answers. But when you have friends like this, then you have an opportunity to solve problems more quickly. So longer answer maybe than you were looking for, but that's how that's the advice I would give.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Chris. Again, this has been fantastic. I think, I was not prepared for the level of, kind of EQ and qualitative stuff that you think about as a sales leader. So it was super refreshing from that perspective. So thank you. Should have mentioned up front, this interview was with Chris. It's about Chris, but he works for tvScientific, which my fund is an investor in. So disclosure there. And we want to bring more of these industry leaders to the pod. So for the listeners, if you can smash that subscribe button, leave a comment, helps the podcast grow, and we can get more awesome people like Chris. Joe, you want to take us home?
I think you covered it. Thanks very much for listening. We'll see you guys next week.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. You're amazing.
Thanks, y'all.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
Thanks, Chris. Bye.
Appreciate you. See you soon.